Few machines in the history of armored warfare cast as imposing a shadow as the Tiger and Panther tanks of Nazi Germany. These fearsome beasts, with their thick armor and devastating firepower, have become iconic symbols of German military might during World War II. Yet, amidst their legendary status lies a contentious debate. Would Germany have fared just as well, or even better, without these heavyweights? Some say these tanks were the apex predators of World War II, while others argue they drained precious resources that could have been better spent on churning out reliable workhorses, like the Panzer IV or StuG III. The prevailing notion is that the Panzer IV, particularly later variants like the Model H, was good enough to fight the T-34 and the M4 Sherman, and it was more reliable and easier to maintain than Germany's big cats. However, it's important to consider the context of wartime decision-making, including factors such as technological capabilities, strategic considerations, and the overall industrial capacity of Germany at the time. Join us as we explore whether Germany's focus on Tigers and Panthers was a tactical triumph or a costly misstep. When picturing German tanks of the Second World War, the image of the long-barreled Panzer IVs, Panthers, and Tigers often comes to mind. However, the tanks they actually went to war with weren't those heavyweights. Instead, the bulk of German tank force was comprised of several variants of light and medium tanks. During the interwar period and at the onset of the war, the German armor strategy leaned towards prioritizing quantity over quality. However, as the war progressed, the Germans came to recognize several critical aspects of their armored warfare situation. During Operation Barbarossa, the Germans were caught off guard when they encountered formidable Russian tanks such as the KV-1 and the T-34. Their standard anti-tank guns of 37mm and 50mm proved ineffective against these powerful adversaries. The most powerful gun the Germans had mounted was the 50mm gun on the Panzer III. The Panzer IV was equipped with the stubby 75mm L-24 gun at that time, originally designed for targeting bunkers rather than engaging enemy tanks. The Russian T-34 they encountered proved to be vastly superior in comparison. The primary challenge lay in the absence of adequate weaponry to effectively counter the T-34 tank. By 1941, the predominant anti-tank gun in the German arsenal was the modest 37mm model. Although efforts were made to upgrade Panzer IIIs with 50mm guns, these enhancements fell short, leaving a portion of them still equipped with the 37mm option. Even at an extremely close range of 100 meters, and using the more powerful tungsten core Panzergranate 40 ammunition, the 37mm gun could only penetrate up to 60 millimeters of armor. Meanwhile, the line-of-sight thickness of the T-34's armor stood at 90 millimeters. And until 1942, the Soviets built 20,000 of these. To effectively counter the T-34, the Germans required at least a 75mm gun. However, at the onset of the Battle of Moscow in October 1941, they had no 75mm guns in their arsenal. The development of the 75mm Pak-40 was still underway, hastily pushed forward to address the pressing need for more powerful anti-tank weaponry. While the Germans did possess the 88mm gun from World War I, its use as an anti-tank weapon in the early stages of World War II was limited due to logistical and tactical considerations. Despite its formidable firepower, the 88mm gun required a sizable crew of 8 artillerymen and relied on heavy prime movers weighing up to 15 tons, far exceeding the capacity of vehicles like the Panzer II or Panzer III. Furthermore, the 88 was not well suited for rapid deployment and maneuverability. Its size and weight made it cumbersome to relocate quickly, hindering its effectiveness in dynamic battlefield scenarios where mobility was crucial. As a result, while the 88mm gun could serve as a potent anti-tank weapon, its high maintenance requirements and logistical constraints limited its utility in certain tactical situations. Indeed, the disparity between the 37mm and 88mm guns underscored the desperate situation faced by the Germans in late 1941 and early 1942. To address the pressing need for more powerful anti-tank weaponry, they resorted to using captured Soviet 76mm guns. While this was a pragmatic solution to temporarily bolster their anti-tank capabilities, it also highlighted the severity of their predicament and the necessity for rapid adaptations in the face of evolving battlefield challenges. While the captured Soviet 76mm guns could be manually maneuvered by pushing, relying on manpower and horses for transportation was far from ideal. To address the mobility and firepower challenges, the Germans ingeniously repurposed the captured Soviet 76mm guns by mounting them on the chassis of smaller vehicles, such as the Panzer II and Panzer XXXVIII. These conversions resulted in the creation of the Marder II and Marder III tank destroyers. Despite the relatively small size of these chassis, they provided a platform for the installation of the powerful Soviet guns. Additionally, to manage the recoil generated by firing these guns, muzzle brakes were attached to the Russian field guns. The introduction of the 75mm Pak 40 anti-tank gun in 1942 marked a significant improvement in German anti-tank capabilities. With its superior performance compared to the Russian 76mm gun, the Pak 40 provided the German forces with a much-needed advantage on the battlefield. As the Pak 40 began to reach the front lines, it was promptly mounted on vehicles like the Marder II and Marder III. These converted tank destroyers played a crucial role in bolstering German defenses and preventing the front line from collapsing under the pressure of advancing enemy tanks. But Marders were not expected to survive from a direct hit. From March 1942 onwards, both the StuG III and the Panzer IV began to be equipped with the 75mm L-43 guns. 10 months into Operation Barbarossa, Germany finally had AFVs with potent guns capable of confronting Soviet armor. Initially, the Germans had anticipated victory in 1941, but the emergence of tanks like the T-34 and KV-1 changed all that. The appearance of the Tiger tank stemmed from a sense of desperation, prompted by these unexpected challenges faced by Germany on the Eastern Front. The design process for the Tiger actually commenced a month before the launch of Operation Barbarossa in May 1941. Initially, it was envisioned as a project for the distant future, with development progressing slowly due to the belief that such a heavy tank was not immediately necessary. However, engagements against tanks such as the T-34 and KV-1, with their heavy armor and powerful guns, prompted a reassessment of German tank design priorities and accelerated the development of the Tiger. The Tiger was officially ordered into production in May of 1942. Around the same period, from April to June 1942, the Panzer IV and StuG III began to be equipped with the longer L-48 version of the 75mm gun. It wasn't until a full year after the Russian invasion that the Germans managed to develop effective countermeasures against the T-34. In 1943, the Tiger emerged as a formidable force on the battlefield, asserting its dominance from Africa to Leningrad. Despite the T-34's potential superiority that could have led to the defeat of German forces in 1941, Stalin's purges of Russian officers weakened the Soviet command structure. In contrast, the Germans exhibited a high level of organization and proficiency in utilizing tanks through combined tactics. At this point, the Germans had gleaned significant insights. They recognized the invaluable importance of a well-trained tank crew, yet their supply of such experienced crews was diminishing. Even if they ramped up tank production, they lacked the veteran crews needed to operate them effectively. Also, a tank that boasts a 50% superiority over another tank doesn't inherently demand a 50% increase in fuel consumption or steel usage for its construction. Investing in quality proves worthwhile, especially when faced with shortages of both fuel and steel. The Tiger quickly earned a reputation for its formidable firepower and robust armor, establishing itself as a powerful adversary on the battlefield. Unlike medium tanks, Tigers were not integrated as armored fighting vehicles alongside infantry units. Instead, Tigers were organized into Abteilungen or detachments, which were battalion-sized units, manned by the most skilled tankers the German military could muster. These heavy detachments were designed to function as fire brigades, deployed wherever they were most needed. Whether reinforcing faltering German lines or spearheading breakthroughs, these Abteilungen were always on the move, transported to where they were needed most, rather than remaining static within a single formation. On the battlefield, Tigers were formidable beasts, capable of both delivering devastating destruction and withstanding enemy fire. Numerous Tiger aces achieved remarkable feats, destroying over 100 enemy tanks each, in addition to numerous anti-tank guns and soft-skinned vehicles. A single Schwerabteilung could rival an entire armored division in terms of firepower and effectiveness. Also, it's important to acknowledge that the Tiger tanks did have a significant psychological impact on the battlefield. Their reputation for invincibility led to fear and caution among enemy forces, and even encountering a single Tiger tank could disrupt an entire offensive. This psychological advantage cannot be overlooked, as it affected enemy morale and decision-making. While Tiger tanks wreaked havoc on the battlefield, the Germans continued to upgrade the Panzer IV. The Panzer IV went through 10 separate distinct production models, encompassing dozens of changes ranging from massive to minuscule. Despite the upgrade in hull armor thickness from 50mm to 80mm, the Panzer IV's turret armor remained insufficient at 50mm. This left the tank vulnerable to enemy fire, especially when facing the T-34 with its line-of-sight armor thickness of 90mm. The Panzer IV stands out as perhaps the most extensively and thoroughly upgraded tank in history. The Germans exhaustively squeezed every ounce of potential from the tank, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for enhancement. Every conceivable upgrade was implemented, leaving no further room for improvement. By the time the modifications were complete, the tank, which initially weighed 18 tons, now tipped the scales at 25 tons, nearly half again as much. The Panzer IV faced challenges with its drivetrain due to the increased weight from heavier frontal armor and a larger gun. Despite these upgrades, the tank reached its limit in terms of mounting anything bigger unless the turret was completely removed. Even with the Jagdpanzer IV variant, which eliminated the turret altogether, the chassis was pushed to its capacity. The weight distribution was particularly problematic, with much of it concentrated on the nose. This imbalance led to issues such as stripping the rubber rims of the two front wheels, highlighting the practical limitations faced by the Panzer IV platform. The need for a medium tank, larger and more powerful than the Panzer IV, became increasingly apparent, leading to the development of the Panther. Towards the end of 1943, the Russians introduced the 85mm gun on the T-34, providing it with increased firepower. While the T-34-85's gun and armor were somewhat inferior to those of the Tiger I, it offered a more cost-effective alternative. With over 20,000 T-34-85s produced compared to just about 1,300 Tigers, they outnumbered and outpaced the Tiger I in terms of production. With the emergence of the T-34-85, it became increasingly clear that the production of costly Tigers no longer offered any practical advantage. Similarly, if the formidable 100mm armor of the Tiger could be penetrated, then the Panzer IV's 50mm turret armor stood little chance against the new threat. This situation emphasized the pressing need for a superior medium tank that could be mass-produced, prompting the accelerated development of the Panther. The Panther's innovative 85mm sloped armor provided it with an effective line-of-sight armor thickness of over 145mm, surpassing the Tiger's 100mm armor. Additionally, the Panther's 75mm L70 gun boasted superior firepower compared to the Tiger I's 88mm gun. Despite having thinner side armor than the Tiger, approximately half as thick, the Panther's overall capabilities allowed it to engage and effectively counter any tank in the Soviet arsenal, including the formidable IS-2. The Panzer IV was ill-equipped to handle a formidable adversary of such magnitude. The Germans also came to realize that it's entirely possible to build a vastly superior tank without substantially inflating costs. It's simply a matter of efficient design. The Panther serves as the prime example of this principle. It boasted nearly double the combat effectiveness of the Panzer IV, while only being approximately 15% more expensive to produce. The development of the Tiger II was driven by German anticipation of facing thousands of heavy tanks like the IS-2 from the Soviets. However, with hindsight, it's clear that this expectation led to a misallocation of resources, as Panthers were more than capable of dealing with such threats. Unfortunately, the Germans lacked this insight at the time, leading to the development of the Tiger II, despite the Panther's capacity to handle the challenge posed by Soviet heavy tanks. As the war progressed, the Germans anticipated facing newer Soviet tanks like the IS-3, which boasted formidable front armor thickness exceeding 200mm in line of sight. With its powerful 75mm L70 gun and specialized ammunition like the Panzer IV, the Panther could penetrate up to 234mm of vertical armor at 500 meters, surpassing the IS-3's capabilities. In comparison, the IS-3's 122mm gun could only achieve around 150mm of penetration at the same distance. Thus, in a head-to-head confrontation, the Panther and the IS-3 might have been similarly matched, despite the latter's thicker armor. So, Tiger I and Panther were absolutely necessary for Germany. However, looking back, the necessity of the Tiger II is debatable. Yet, had the war prolonged, the emergence of the IS-3 might have made the Tiger II essential. In summary, while there is a valid argument that Germany would have been better off focusing on producing more Panzer IVs, StuG IIIs, and later Panthers, the decision to produce the Tiger I and Tiger II tanks was influenced by a combination of factors, including the desire for superior firepower, dwindling supplies, and the psychological impact they had on the battlefield.